What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Ayomide. If you're new here, you are absolutely welcome. On this channel, you're going to find DIY sewing tutorials. You would also find pattern drafting tutorials. In this tutorial, I'm going to be sharing how I made this off-shoulder maxi dress with side pockets. So if you have been meaning to learn how to make this, then this video is for you and you should see this till the very end. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please click the subscribe button down below, and you could also turn on your notification for more videos. Now, without talking too much, let us get started. These are the materials I'm going to be working with. I have my Ankara fabric here, I have my fabric scissors, I also have some pins right here that I'm going to be needing. I have my measuring tape, and I'm going to be using a 1-inch elastic band for the elastic because there's going to be an elastic around the neckline. I also have my tailor's chalk here also. So these are what I'm going to be working with. We need to do some modification for our calculations. So you need to add some allowances to the widest circumference of your body, and I'm using 8 inches for this, and that gave me a total of 51. Now you will need to divide that by 4, and that gave me 12.75. You could also add 6 inches, you could add 4 inches. It really depends on how big you want your dress to be. So now let us get into the cutting of this dress. I've gone ahead to fold my fabric into 2 based on that measurement, and I added some allowances. I also left about 7 inches from the topmost part of my fabric. This is because we would need to add some allowances there too. This line here is also going to be my starting line, and from that line the first thing I would mark would be 1.5 inch, and that is going to be my ruffle length. You could use 2 inches. If you want a higher ruffle, you could use 2.5 inches, but I'm going with 1.5 inch and I'm marking that down. What I'll do next is to also replicate that measurement, and this is because I'm going to be folding my fabric to the wrong side. I'm going to be folding it over in order to secure the ruffle. So whatever you mark for your ruffle would be what you would mark again. The next measurement I would mark would be for the elastic casing. Remember, I'm using 1-inch elastic, and you will need to create room that your elastic will pass through. So I marked 1.2 inch, but I would advise that if you're using a 1-inch elastic, you could go for 1.5 or 1.75 inch. This will make it very easy for you when you want to pass your elastic through. The next thing you also need to do is to mark 1/2 inch. This is going to be the hemming allowance when we are turning all of these things over. Let me just shed more light on all of these lines. When we are ready to sew, we are going to be turning our fabric over just after the first ruffle allowance that we added. So this is how we are going to be turning it over, and you're going to be having your elastic casing and your ruffle allowance also. Now the next thing here is that from the starting line I'm going to be placing 6 inches. This is because this is how much I want to take away for off shoulder. So if you want to take away 5 inches, mark 5 inches there, but I'm taking away 6 inches and I'm marking my length, and I've gone ahead to mark out my length. Here is my length, and I also added 2 inches hemming allowance because I want to have a wider turn over. Now the next thing I would also do is that placing 6 inches on that same line, I'm going to be marking the waist measurements, not because I want to use the waist measurement, but because I want to fix an inner pocket, and this would serve as a guide for me when I want to fix my pockets. Once I'm through with that, I would also go over and then mark that measurements we calculated initially, 12.75 plus 1 inch sewing allowance, and I'm going to be marking that measurement all the way down. I will also extend it to the allowances that I added to the topmost part of my fabric. Now, in order for you to shape your armhole properly, I would also place 6 inches on that line and then mark my chest line measurement. I would also advise you to add about 1/2 inch or 1 inch ease. So mine is 8 inches, and then I just marked it down. And then I'm also going to be folding my fabric just after the initial ruffle allowance. So when you fold it, you should have something like this, and this is going to be your ruffle allowance, this is going to be your elastic casing, and this will be the 1/2 inch hemming allowance. So make sure you fold it over properly, and then you must have also extended your measurements to the topmost part of your fabric by now. And from there, I'll be coming inward by 2.5 inches. I think that was what I marked. You could also use 3 inches. Now once I'm done marking all of that, I would grab my pattern master and then draw out my armhole curve, but you don't want it to be so curvy, so I'll just draw a straight line down to the chest line measurement and then just create a tiny little curve to give it that curve that the armhole usually have. Once I'm through with this, I can go ahead and then cut out my fabric. I'm done cutting out, and this is what I have. This is what my fabric looks like, and this would only be for the front panel. So what that means is that I need to duplicate this again for the back. So all I have to do is to just place my fabric on fold and place this on it, and also cut. The back does not need any zipper allowance since we are going to be fixing an elastic around the shoulder area. Remember, this is an off shoulder dress. Now remember, we marked the waist measurement on that dress when we're drafting the pattern. So what I'll do is just create a notch there, and this will serve as a guide for me when I want to fix the pocket. I'll also create a notch around the line whereby I'm supposed to fold this in. So I'm just creating a notch just after the first ruffle length, the first ruffle allowance that we marked. So that is how you're going to be folding this gown over. So just create a notch and make it very easy for you to sew when you are ready to sew. Now, in order to draw out, or rather draft the sleeve, I folded the fabric into two also, and the next thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to be marking about 10 inches thereabouts. But you could also do a calculation. You could take your across back and your across front measurement and deduct it from your round shoulder, and then duplicate whatever measurement you have just to create more room. Or you could also opt for 10 inches. It will create more room for you. Then I'm going to be bringing my front panel or back panel, anyone, since they are the same, and I'm going to be replicating the armhole area. I will just go over and then carve out the armhole just the way I have it on the main body, because I need it to be the same just to make my work very easy for me. I'll also mark out the area where I notched where I'm going to be turning it over, so that I can transfer that area on the sleeve too, and also make this entire sewing process very easy. What I will do next is that from that line, from that marking, I will mark the length of the sleeve, which is 12 inches, and I'm going to be marking my hemming allowance of 1.5 inch. On the hemming allowance, I'm going to be marking half of the round sleeve measurement, and I will also mark 1 inch sewing allowance too. Just the way you draft your sleeve, you need to add the necessary allowances on your fabric, and that is what I'm going over to do. And I'm also going over to connect all of the points together. Once I'm through, I would also go over and then cut out my sleeve, place my fabric on fold again so that I can duplicate the sleeve to have one for the left and to also have one for the right. What I'm going over to do next is to cut out my pockets. Remember, this gown is going to be having an inner pocket on both sides of the gown. So from the line that I have marked, I'm going over to mark 7.5 inches. The opening of your pocket shouldn't be too wide, so that whatever you put inside would not fall off, and it should also not be too small, because the idea of the pocket is to allow your hands to go in freely. Your hand should be able to pass through freely. Now from the initial line that I marked, I'm going to be drawing like a letter D. You could make your pockets bigger than this, because this pocket was actually quite small. It was very, very small. But you could make yours bigger than this, and feel free to shape it however you want. But this letter D kind of works because that's a way of just accommodating things. And because we are going to be fixing the pockets on both sides of the gown, I'm going to be duplicating this too. So placing my fabric on fold, I'm just going over to place my already drawn cutout pocket, and I'm also going to be replicating this pattern. In order to sew, the first thing is that we have to fix the pocket. And how do you do that? You will need to locate the notch we made on the gown. Remember, I said is to allow us to easily fix the pockets. So I'm grabbing the pockets that would match accordingly to that side of the gown, placing right sides against each other. You have to sew this on the right side. Starting from the notch, I will just sew it down along the length, and I would mark my seam allowance of 1 inch away. So I'm fixing my pockets 1 inch away from my seam allowance. Whatever your seam allowance is, mark it and then fix your pockets on it, and I'll just go over and sew this down. I'll also repeat the same thing for the other side of this gown too. Pick up the pockets that matches accordingly to this side of the gown, locate the notch and fix it. When you're fixing these pockets, your letter D has to be downward, because when you put your hand inside, you want the pocket to properly accommodate your hand. So that's why I say you should draw it like a letter D. And once I'm done, I would also go over and sew it down. I'm also going over to fix the pockets for the second panel of this dress too. I'm done fixing the pockets on this side of my gown. You can see the way it looks, and I've also done that for this other side of my gown too. I also did it for the second panel of this dress too. And after fixing, you would also give it a very good press. Make sure you iron it properly so that it can lay nicely on your dress. So the next thing I'll do is to join the front and the back panel together. And how do I do that? All I have to do is to just place right sides against each other and arrange it in such a way that the pockets are aligning properly. Start sewing by my seam allowance. Once I get to the pockets, I will take it through the pattern of the pockets, come out, and then continue my journey all the way to the length of the hem of this dress. I would also repeat the same thing to this other side of my gown. So I did something here. I ironed down the fold line. This actually made my work very easy, and I would also advise you, if you're going to be doing this, to iron down your fold line, because once you fix your sleeve, it might be quite difficult to iron this down. So just iron your fold line down. Okay guys, so I'm done fixing the pocket, and this is what my gown looks like. You can see my hand is freely inside the pocket, and it is well sewn and it is intact. What I'll go over and do next is I'm going to be fixing the sleeve, and I've gone ahead to hem the sleeve and also sew it by the side by my seam allowance of 1 inch. So you need to do that also. I'm going to be turning my sleeve to the right side. I'm also going over to turn the gown to the right side also, because I want to use some pins to attach the sleeve to this gown. Locating the side seam of the sleeve, you will need to locate the side seam of the sleeve and then match it up to the side seam of the gown. This is very important. They need to match up properly. So I'm just going over to match them up properly, and I'm picking a pin to secure it together. Then I'm going to be picking one part of the sleeve and match it up to this other part of my gown, that is the armhole area of the gown. So pick one armhole area of the sleeve and match it up to the armhole area of your gown. So you see why you need to use your gown armhole to draft out your sleeve armhole. It just makes it very easy for you to sew. And I'm also doing the same thing for this other side of the armhole area too. Once I'm done, all I have to do is to just go ahead and sew this down, and that is what I've gone ahead to do. I've gone ahead to sew it all the way down. Now this gown looks very big around the shoulder area, but once we put the elastic, it would shrink. The next thing now is to create our elastic casing and also our ruffle. Remember I said I ironed around the fold line, and this made my job very easy. So what I'm just going over to do is to fold it inward. I'm really grateful that I did not have to struggle at this point. So just make sure you iron your sleeve and iron your panels, your fabric panels, your gown panels before you sew them together. So I'm just going over to fold it down, to turn it down around the fold line. Then once I'm done, the next thing I will do is that I'm going to be marking the ruffle length, but you need to also make sure that you've properly turned this over around the fold line so that you don't make any mistakes. My ruffle length is 1.5 inch, and I'm going over to mark down 1.5 inch, and I'm going to be sewing along that 1.5 inch. Once I'm done sewing, I will also sew down the half an inch allowance which we added. I've also ironed that part down and I've turned it over, but while sewing that one, I'm not going to be completing it. So I'm done sewing and I have my ruffle length here, which is 1.5 inch. You can see it's 1.5 inch, and I've also sewed down that half inch. That half inch would create the casing for the elastic, but you don't need to complete your sewing because you need a passage for your elastic. We're going to be completing it later on. So this is the passage I created. It is about 1.5 or 2 inches wide. You don't really need to make it so wide, but just make it wide enough for your elastic to pass through. To fix my elastic, I will need the elastic itself and also two safety pins. So I attach one safety pin to one end of the elastic, and I attach the other safety pin to the other end of the elastic, and I secure that to one part of the dress. This is because I don't want the elastic to just run over. I don't want to lose the elastic in the process of passing it through. Now with the other end that is free, I'm going to be passing my elastic through the casing, and this process is very simple and very easy. It is equally beginner friendly. When you pass your elastic through completely, make sure you adjust the shoulder width to your round shoulder measurement. I'm done and I've adjusted the shoulder width to my round shoulder measurement. What I will do next is I'm going to be securing the both elastic together, and grabbing the elastic, I'll just go over to my sewing machine, sew this down, trim off any excess, and also close up the opening that was created in order for this elastic to be passed through. After that, I would also go over and hem the dress. I would also hem this dress by using the seam allowance of 2 inches, which I added. And once I'm done, I'm through with this garment, and I can't wait to show you guys the outcome. Here's the outcome of the dress. I love the fact that this style is very easy and very simple to make. If you found this tutorial helpful, kindly give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to also like and share this video.